The Life Esidimeni arbitration hearing sat for over 40 days. Our reporter Zikhona Tshona has been tracking that story for us from the beginning. Zikhona, was today a fitting ending to what has been this long and painful story?
I think for many of the families today, they felt some kind of justice has been served on their part. If you remember, the state had been arguing all along that it does not feel that it should compensate families for the violation of rights on the part of the patients who died or those who survived the tragedy. So the state kept on arguing that it only feels that it should compensate family members for the trauma that they endured during this process, as well as funeral costs. So that constitutional damages claim actually was celebrated a lot in the room. A lot of people felt this was their victory on this case, and they felt that at last they were heard by the state. I mean, David Bakura was there throughout the proceedings today, and it's the first time he's attended the proceedings apart from his testimony. He greeted the family members afterwards, and I know that they had a private meeting. So a lot of the family members are also feeling that they've been treated very fairly by the state. The state has been very accommodating, very compassionate about what they went through.
Let's talk about this figure. Of course, at the time that it was put up during those arguments, there were questions about how it was arrived at. Did Justice Moseneke at all explain what were the considerations he made?
So prior to today, the state and several legal teams had already agreed that there would be an amount of 200,000 rand paid to families for trauma, as well as to cover the funeral costs. So that was not disputed. And then he said that he would not be deciding individually as to how much a family should be compensated, because there are a lot of families that are involved in this case, and there are a lot of facts to consider in terms of how much pain, suffering people went through or endured as a result of this negligence by the Gauteng Department of Health. So he said he would just give a blanket compensation for all the families that were affected. So we know, Kathy, it's the families of the deceased as well as the families of the survivors that will be compensated. Obviously, the families of the survivors won't get the 20,000 rand allocated to the funeral cost that all family members endured.
It sounds like it's going to be quite a complex process going forward in terms of who gets given what. Has that been made clear for the families, and any indication of when these monies will be paid out? Because, of course, we are dealing with the state, and sometimes bureaucracy tends to delay a lot of things.
So the money has to be paid to families within 3 months. So 3 months as of the release of the report. And as far as I understand, the legal representatives of the family are actually making financial advisors available for these families. I spoke to Solidarity. They have investments within their group that will be speaking and advising families individually. Section 27 says they've approached an insurance company to come and do workshops with families as to how they should spend this money or where they can invest this money. As you understand, it's a lot of money that family members will be receiving, and many of them will probably be overwhelmed by the amount. So they will be getting financial advice as to how this money should be spent. But the Deputy Chief Justice didn't really go into detail as to the distribution process of this money. I think he's trusting that the Gauteng department, provincial department, will do the right thing, because all along they've been very cooperative. As you know, David Bakura has held several meetings with families prior to today. Even outside of the arbitration hearings, he's been meeting with families to keep them comforted, to let them know that the department is still there holding their hand through this pain.
There's a question of criminality that is yet to be answered, Zikhona. What happens now that the findings are the way they were, especially against the former MEC and the two senior officials in her department? What happens to them now? And is this matter being taken up within the South African police police service?
There is already a police investigation that is running parallel to these arbitration hearings. Now, Kathy, the police investigation has also been using the witnesses' accounts that we've been hearing day in, day out at the arbitration hearings to help with their investigation. So the former Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke is saying he doesn't want to give recommendations as to how this matter should be handled in terms of criminal charges, but he trusts that the police will do their work. Now, when it comes to the medical professionals that had a hand in this project, the likes of Dr. Makhabu Manamela, the likes of Dr. Banis Silubano, he's advised that the provincial government report them to the mental or mental health authorities as well as health authorities, so that because they did break their oath as medical professionals. Those are medical professionals that should have known better, that should have acted better in the interest of patients.
What becomes of the families of the 44 people who currently remain unaccounted for?
That's still a very sore point, because this number, it decreases, but it doesn't decrease by a lot of people. A lot of people really believe that the family members have died, but no one knows where they are. And it seems very bizarre that in a project of this magnitude, no one would know where certain people ended up. As you understand, patients were loaded on bakkies, patients were loaded on trucks. They were moved without identification, they were moved without medical records, they were moved without medication. So for a lot of them, and they were moved to areas that were in isolation from their families. They were moved to areas where the NGO is not even surrounded by a community that can return someone to the NGO, say they go walking about and they can't find their way back. So it's still a very sore point, and we really don't know how this is going to play out. The DA, as far as I understand, has laid criminal charges against the Gauteng Department of Health for those missing people.
Do those families then, are they also covered by this compensation?
It's very hard to tell. The families that are covered, when I was doing my maths, don't even add up to the total number of deceased. As far as I understand, 73 families are represented by Section 27, 68 are represented, which is the families of the survivors, are represented by legal aid, and only 4 families are represented by solidarity. So today, those are the families that will be compensated as far as this report is concerned. But of course, it's been a situation where families have been coming to the arbitration hearings with their documents to prove that they were indeed affected by this tragedy. I received a message on Twitter while I was covering the hearings today, Kathy, of someone who was saying that their brother actually went missing from Viscopis and then they were sent to Orange Farm at an NGO. So there are a lot of families that are still not in this group that will be compensated after today, but now they need to speak up. Now they need to talk. I know at the start of the arbitration hearings, there was a lot of calls for families to come forward, for families to speak and say, my loved one was there, and therefore I feel I should be a part of this process. So I think going forward, I mean, David Makura has been very dedicated in terms of working with mental health professionals in finding these family members, but really to no avail.
Well, it sounds like there's still a lot of administrative work to be done on this particular story. Thank you for bringing us up to speed with it. Zikhona Tshona, she was in that room today as Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke delivered his findings into the inquiry.